What's up, nerds? How are you? Here, let me just, nope, that's not what I wanted to do. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's just go over here. Let's just go over here, click play, so we play music. Okay. Hi. Welcome to, the solar system, but not quite as you know it. Alright, so basically, this is my, physical representation of a idea for a story, right? It's not that long. It is a tale of war, but it's in Universe Sandbox because it takes place in all the planets of the solar system. And this is a great way to visualize that. So, I will simply give you a tour of what happens. So, essentially, right? Essentially, there has been a war. So, it takes place 1,000 years in the future. Don't mind this down here. It's just simply wrong, okay? This takes place 1,000 years in the future. Humanity first colonized the moon. And then they started to colonize Mars. And then they started to terraform both the moon and Mars. Quickly realized terraforming the moon was dumb because you can't really terraform the moon. So they decided to focus on Mars. Now, the moon was a fully developed society at this point, and Mars was developing. So the people on Mars didn't really like the people on Earth. So they were like, hey, why don't we align? So the moon had some sort of independence arc, like a story arc, right? And they became Luna, which is the one of the official names of the moon. I think it's like Greek or Latin or something. So Luna and Mars formed an alliance and helped each other to become independent from Earth. Now, they saw that as a harmless gesture because economically it was just a better idea. But Earth was quite paranoid, a lot, because the other two human civilizations were aiding each other in independence. They thought they were about to strike down them. And something I forgot to mention, which was really stupid. This all started. Well, it didn't start because of this, but the first event was the invention and utilization of antimatter technology. If you don't know what antimatter is, basically it behaves the exact same as normal matter, except with one. Is someone really come downstairs right now? What time is it? 8? Okay. Assuming no one's gonna tell me to fuck off, antimatter behaves the exact same as normal matter, except with one difference. It when it comes into contact with normal matter, it blows up in a 100% efficient, pure release of energy. I don't think there's a whole lot of radiation. It's just energy, so I guess it is radiation, but it's not like particles or anything. There's no dust. It is literally just pure energy. Because when the funny quarks, when those things smack the other things, basically all you need to know is if you have, for example, 1 gram of antimatter and 1 gram of normal matter, and you smash the two together, you get a pure energy release, which is quite powerful. It is a really efficient source of energy. Now, unfortunately, there's no known natural deposits of antimatter in existence, because if antimatter was a natural thing, then that planet would blow up. So, it's just, you just can't find it. You have to make it. Hi. Shh. I know. Huh? Yes. Okay. Alright, don't mind that temporary pause. Alright. So basically, antimatter go big boom boom. But it's also quite useful. You can use it as very efficient propulsion fuel, right? You could go a whole bunch of places with it. It's really cool. So they were like, "Oh, hey, this is a really efficient way to both store power and to go places." So they did that. They built like a sort of Dyson swarm around the sun, which I should probably add at some point. But they built a Dyson swarm around the sun to collect its energy. Oh no, wait, it was around Venus. Okay, so it was. I forgot. The Dyson swarm was around Venus. Collected solar energy, sent it down to the surface in little pellets of antimatter to create some sort of bank, or in orbit, I haven't decided yet, but essentially around Venus there's a bank of antimatter. that get sent off to these other places to use as however they want. So Earth was quite terrified because there's a hypothetical weapon that they knew that Mars and Luna knew of called an antimatter bomb, where you just take the explosive attributes of antimatter when it comes into contact with normal matter, and you exploit that a fuck ton. I think if you have like a kilogram of antimatter, it creates like something akin to a nuclear explosion. So it's quite powerful, and they didn't know how much antimatter they had. So they're just like, okay, war? So they were very concerned. They knew that Luna could be alliance with Mars. They didn't really like know if they were planning to war with them. So they just had to assume the worst because, Earth. So they sent missiles, pew 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 pew, at Luna in the Earth Moon system. The missiles were so powerful they knocked the moon permanently off its tidal lock. Okay, this is getting quite loud. If you know how the moon in our reality only shows one of its faces to us, that's because it's tidally locked, meaning for every time it orbits the Earth, which is about 28 days, or 29 days, I forget which it is, it takes that same exact amount of time to make one rotation. So one day on the moon is just under a month long. And one revolution of the moon around the Earth is also 1 month long. So you get this effect where only one side of the moon faces Earth. Because, the moon is a 3D spherical object. I mean, it's not like it's just a paper mache up there. Like, every other object in the universe is spherical and the moon's just paper. What is flat Earth? What is the Earth flat? The Earth and the moon are just flat? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Fuck you. Anyway, so yeah, it knocked that off that 1 month day period to about 2.5 days. And that accelerated the speed at the equator of the moon, how fast it spun, by like 10 or 20 times. So understandably, the cities underground the moon, because they didn't really have surface cities, because that was stupid. I'm just gonna skip this again. Cities on the surface of the moon were impractical, so they had underground cities in subterranean tunnels. And when the moon started to spin really fast, those got fucked up. It was essentially like a permanent punch, like an earthquake with only one shake, right? So that was quite unfortunate. So the moon was in disarray. I'm sorry, Luna was in disarray. Ignore that voice crack. Luna was in disarray, right? And they sent an emergency broadcast out to Mars. And they said, we're being fucking slaughtered, help us. And, Mars was 12 light minutes away at that time. So when they finally did get the message, they didn't know if Luna was still alive or not. Excuse me. So what they did was they decided to release a sort of prototype weapon. The Earth and Luna had been firing antimatter warheads at each other through interplanetary space. The moon retaliated, by the way. I forgot to mention that. But Luna retaliated, struck, I think, general Europe. America and China struck the moon first, and everyone else was planned to follow suit just because they had the largest stockpile. But Luna just attacked Europe because that's where it seemed the next shot would come from, right? So then they were at a stalemate for like half an hour, and Mars got the signal and had enough time to send missiles their way. And the missiles are much slower than the speed of light, although they did travel really fast, like 10% the speed of light, so it took a bit over an hour for them to reach. So Earth tried to intercept these missiles and hit the moon some more. The moon defended itself because it had time to see these missiles coming and prepare. And only 3 of the 5 missiles launched from Mars were successfully intercepted by the Earth in interplanetary space. So if they were fired like right here, then they would have been intercepted at about here. But 2 of them made it all the way to Earth, and they struck America and China. And that Mars just did not understand the power that these bombs had. They were the most powerful weapons in the entire solar system. I kind of want to add this detail where when one of them was intercepted over here, only later do they realize they blew up a comet. So, on accident. So, when Earth was destroyed, right? Well, Earth was destroyed. Okay, Earth was destroyed. I'll show you Earth eventually, but just know that Earth no longer has any life on it. They had no idea the power the weapons they held would cause, or would unleash, right? The warheads caused the sixth greatest mass extinction of all history of Earth. It turned into a lava planet temporarily. The atmosphere thickened by 20-30%. The sun was blotted out by humongous ash clouds. Mounds of debris were shot into orbit, never to return for 1,000 years, which is when this takes place. So there's a ring of debris around the Earth. And all life died, even humans. I mean, what could they really do? Maybe they could, like, just fuck off underground for a few decades, but they could never reemerge on the surface. I mean, the atmosphere was too thick for them to breathe. It was... the greenhouse effect just started and just kept on going. So it essentially became a bit like Venus. It got a thicker atmosphere. It got hotter. There was no light, and there was nothing to eat, grow, or do. So essentially, Earth was fucked. So after a bit under 100 years underground, all remaining humans would have just died out. And then that would have marked the end of all life, even deep ocean life, even like the... what's it called? The whatever, the rock bacteria that live actually in the crust of the Earth. They even died out because, like, it shook the whole crust of the planet. So yeah, Earth was fucked, and even if, like, they wanted to send a rescue mission for, like, the couple thousand people left on Earth, then they wouldn't have managed to go through the belt of debris left around the Earth from the explosions. I'll show you later. There's like a mini cloud ring around Earth that just has all the debris. So anyway, Earth was fucked, and Luna and Mars were kind of left in the dust. They weren't really that developed yet, but they had to develop themselves really quick, otherwise that would mark the extinction of all humanity. And they also didn't really have an Earth. And, you know, they got some other life forms off Earth, like, I don't know, dogs and birds and fish and some of that stuff. You know, there were zoos being opened on Mars, and there were zoos on whatever the fuck, Luna, you know, to conglomerate, whatever that word is, to make sure that these beautiful species did not go extinct if Earth went extinct. So they had some life, and they had humans, but they didn't have, like, species like, I don't know, some lions, tardigrades. No, tardigrades were alive. I don't know. Some animals were permanently extinct on Earth. So they thought, okay, well, if Earth is fucking destroyed, we don't have another Earth. And so Luna was just orbiting a dead Earth. And that wasn't really all that useful because they couldn't even orbit the Earth closely because of the giant belt of debris. They couldn't even use the Earth for gravity assist because they couldn't get close enough to get that efficiency because there was a giant belt of debris, and that would have shredded anything that got in its way because, you know, rocks in space. They don't want to hit a rock in space. Your window's going to blow up. So they thought, okay, so Mars is going to take a really long time to properly terraform, and it's really hard to terraform even in this god game. I mean, it isn't even that terraform, but they thought, all right, well, we need, like, a new second. Well, this would be their fourth home by now. There's Earth, the Moon, then Mars, and then they chose Venus because it was the only other planet in the solar system they could realistically terraform. And it was going to be really hard to do. Like, Venus was like, it is literally the hell planet. So they didn't even start or even consider terraforming Venus up to that point. So it was going to be a really big, expensive project. It was probably going to be the second biggest project that ever took place in the history of humanity. Well, the actual terraforming of Venus itself would have been the second. The first biggest project would be relocating the moon, aka Luna, to a Venusian orbit. Because what is Earth going to do well, what is Luna going to do orbiting Earth, now called Earth-old, because it's just a dead planet. So in the first, the big hard, it was big hard, all right? It was very difficult. They they moved Luna to a Venusian orbit, so the moon, Luna, is now in an orbit around Earth, and there they oversaw the terraformation of Venus, and Mars was just kind of left to do its own thing in this time. And after a couple hundred years, Venus was successfully terraformed enough so that humanity could move their presence onto the planet. And, you know, Mars is just still doing its thing. So humanity at that point was left to fuck with the other planets of the solar system. Uranus and Neptune were too far to realistically do anything to. They did do something with Pluto and Neptune, which is why Pluto isn't in this, but I'll get to that later. But they mainly focused on Jupiter and then also Saturn. But they mainly focused on these two planets right here. And also Mercury was completely mined out for resources. It's just how it worked. Alright, and that is a perfect segue for me to, okay, if you're just going to be really loud and, you know, do that. Okay, I hope that doesn't get really loud. Ow. Okay, so yeah, let's start the tour of the solar system. So, the sun. The sun is, you know, it's probably the one unchanged thing since all this. Here, let me slow this down to a... Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there's the sun. You know, it just be the sun. Okay, first actual thing, the Mercuroid, because they did mine out Mercury a lot. This is essentially the leftovers of the planet. I mean, if you want to place down... Wait for it to load. Wait for it. Alright, if you want to place down Mercury... Okay, thanks, game. If you want to place down Mercury, like, right next to it, just see how small it is now. There it is. I'm obviously not going to place it down, because then that would actually add Mercury into the simulation, which would fuck everything up, so I don't want to do that. But you know how big it would be. So this is essentially the ash of the mining project. They couldn't really mine this anymore. It's really dense, and it's really useless. So they just left it there as a really small, dense asteroid in a close elliptical orbit around the sun, and it doesn't really do anything anymore. You can't even see it during a transit, so it's just sad. But anyway, Venusia. So it's quite hard to terraform Venus even in Universe Sandbox, but I managed to do it. It has a 1-day orbital period, exactly 1 Earth day long. If you're wondering why that's even worth mentioning, normal Venus day takes like 277 Earth days. 270-ish Earth days. I don't actually know if it's 77. I just remember that number for some reason. It might be because, like, negative 276 or 73 Celsius is, like, 0 Kelvin, which is absolute zero in all of the universe, the coldest spots of temperature. I don't know. It's just a number, but it spins really slow. It takes about a year to make a single rotation. It's almost tidally locked to the sun, naturally. But, oh, it also spun the opposite direction. So you know how all planets have like this counterclockwise rotation? Yeah, Venus spun clockwise, which makes scientists think that there was an ancient collision with some sort of other body. But that's not important right now. What's important is the fact that it's Earth-like. Look at the green. Yeah, here, let's... this is modified, but it's not like I went into the code or anything. I just, like, changed, like, the composition, the atmosphere, over time, in real time. Well, not in real time, but in time, to simulate what terraforming the planet would be like, and what is realistically possible with terraforming. I don't know about, like, changing the spin rate of Venus. I think that might be a little, you know, a little on the nose, you know, but... I mean, look at this. Look at Venus. It's really bright, though. Like, in order to cool it down this much, I had to make the atmosphere, like, as reflective as ice. So, if you want to go outside at, like, the morning or the evening, especially during the day, you're going to want, like, you know, sunglasses and sunblock and tinted windows. But other than that, it's it's quite fine. I don't actually know how bright it is. It could be perfectly livable. I'm sure future humans with antimatter technology could, like, whip up something to decrease the brightness. Like, maybe have a geoengineered troposphere that only reflects upward and doesn't reflect downward, so it's not bright as balls on the surface. I don't know. That would make terraforming easier, because that's the whole reason the greenhouse effect is a bitch. Light reflected on the surface. It's agonizing. Anyway, so Venusia, as it is now called, is an Earth-like planet, and it's not really like its own empire. It's currently under the rule of Luna. It's kind of having its own, like, history as of now. It's like if you sent parties of survivalists to the surface 400 years ago, and they tried to survive up to present day. You understand how their very official scientist, space explorer, vibe would sort of die out eventually. It won't ever fully die out, but it has been replaced with independent society. In fact, even before the war, Luna and Mars had their own little cultures and societies worked out. America, for example, has only existed for about 300 years. Venusia, is like a whole other planet, and it's existed for about 400 years. Luna and Mars have existed independently for like 900 to 1,000 years. So you could tell how different culture would be at this point. So Venusia has its own little history. It's not going to rebel, or at least that's not the plan. If it tries anything funny, Luna's just going to strike it with a bunch of bombs at the, like, major capitals, and then just sort of try and take over the planet. I don't know why I paused halfway through a word, but Venusia is not really going to try anything. It's just here for the ride. It's pretty chill. And then there's Luna, of course. Let me just click the planet. Or the moon, I guess. Luna has a slight atmosphere and city lights, just because. It's too thin to breathe on the surface. Being on the surface of Luna is just like, it's like being a bit higher than Everest on present Earth. Also, this particular crater, this big one, it didn't exist. I added this in. I, like, hooked a comet at it to simulate, an explosion that knocked Luna on its side. And, I didn't intend for the moon to, like, spin faster than it orbits the Earth. Like, I didn't mean to knock it off its, like, rotation. This just started to spin faster, and I was like, oh, I can just incorporate that into the lore. But yeah, the reason why it has an atmosphere and it isn't breathable on the surface is because underground, if there's light air on, like, above the ground, then below the ground it'll be more pressurized. And so while it still isn't a completely habitable atmosphere, it's like being on a high mountain if you go, like, outside of compression, like outside your pressurized house. So you won't die anymore, which is great. You can have high altitude native plants from Earth living in this area. There's artificial sunlight, kind of seeps through holes in the ground, and there's also, just a bunch of artificial lights everywhere, but it's alright. Luna is doing pretty good, if I do say so myself. And yeah, that is Luna, not quite terraformed, but colonized. There's a bunch of life underground. Anyway, and yeah, there's surface cities. I just added city lights because it looks really pretty. Like, look at this. It's the moon, but with city lights. Also, you can tell how having a thin atmosphere kind of eroded the surface a little bit. I mean, it's not the same as our moon. It kind of is the same as our moon, but it has no tectonic activity. And now that it's much closer to the sun than it was orbiting Earth, there are very little asteroids that can actually smack it. So it's probably going to be free of asteroids for a while, which is a good thing, because if it did get struck by an asteroid, the underground cities would once again not have a pleasant time. But yeah, you can see the old face of the moon about here-ish. But yeah, that's Luna and Venusia. I'm pretty sure that's all I need to mention. Moving the moon was a really big task. Anyway, here is the Earth old. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So, no life exists on this planet anymore. You could see the crater that struck America right here, and if it turns a little bit more, you could see the one that struck China. Here, wait for it. I think it's China. It's the Pacific Ocean, or the Pacific Plain, the arid plain of the Pacific, as it is now called. Yep, there's the crater. There's a giant ring there, yeah. So, you can't really see the surface because of how cloudy the Earth is now, but there, as you can tell, there's no water anymore. Since life on Earth no longer, exists, people thought that, does Earth really need this water? So they decided to drain the oceans and move the water to Venusia, for example, just one, so that it could be properly terraformed. Mars got its water from elsewhere. I don't know. Fucking mine the asteroid belt. I don't know. Melted the ice caps. Yeah. Here's Earth now. You can't live here. The atmosphere is. It still has oxygen, but it's now very smoky and ashy and deathy, and it's very thick. So it's like being in a cave? I don't know. It's... Okay, this is gonna get really loud, isn't it? Alright. See, Universe Sandbox music is pretty chill, but you just gotta calm down. Anyway, something else worthy of noting, other than, the rings, which we'll get to, is these craters. When they impacted Earthold, as it is now called, the tectonic plates kind of got locked in place. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 that are still kind of moving around. They're still flowing a bit, but they are sort of locked in. I mean, when Earth became a lava planet for a temporary time, or a short amount of time, not a temporary time, that's not really a word. When Earth became shit, a lot of heat from the core leaked out, and so now it's like 40% as hot as it used to be. So it's essentially tectonic activity on the Earth is now not happening, which is quite unfortunate because, well, actually it's very fortunate for me in this game because that doesn't mean I have to keep replacing Earth with an identical planet with a different surface feature, because you can't actually edit the surface all that much. I mean, you can go into like a planetscaping, but it's like MS Paint where you just like draw elevation and water and stuff. You don't actually move the continents, which would have to be the realistic thing, and I'm very thankful I don't have to do that with the excuse that tectonic activity is stopped. If you think that's unrealistic, first of all, fuck you. Second of all, you can imagine it differently. I mean, that detail specifically is really loose. Okay, I don't want this music. Go to Giants, please. Anyway, yeah, so Earthold is quite unbreathable, quite inhospitable, quite dead. You can recolonize Earth. And, humans are planning on doing that eventually. But as of right now, they're just letting Earthold to do its thing. Because it's pretty bad right now. But they're just letting things calm down. They're almost calmed down after 1,000 years. So, eventually recolonization can... I mean... Excuse me. I just had to burp for some reason. I mean, if humans could terraform Venus, they could very easily terraform Earth. But right now, they're just, letting it cool down. Focusing on their own things right now. But yeah, the ring of debris, worth mentioning, that's the stuff that the craters knocked up. When they blew up, ring. That's a very simple explanation, actually. I think Earth still has a tilt. I think it's much less. Usually it's like 23 degrees. Now it's like 14 degrees now. So Earth isn't really on its side anymore, but it still has, some seasons. There's the sun. Woo, there's Mercury. Yeah, so if you tried to orbit these rings in the simulation, you wouldn't really face any trouble, because in reality these ring particles are really small. I mean, if I turn off enhanced visibility, you can't even see them. I mean, these individual rings are the size of like golf balls or like bowling balls, and when you consider the fact that this is a planet we're looking at right here, you can quickly see the in the simulation, these are basically negligible. I mean, it's like having the satellites in orbit. I mean, you could very easily place an object here and not have it be destroyed. But in the lore, this is a thick belt of debris that they're just letting settle down. So just imagine this is like 1,000 times thicker, but for the sake of my PC, we're not going to make that 1,000 times thicker. So yeah, we're like more than 1,000 times. Anyway, you also notice the lack of the moon. That's because, you know, the moon was moved over there, but whatever. I think eventually this could become like an actual ring around the Earth, which would be cool. The people could have like a ring around Earth, but, you know, I'm just not gonna mess with that yet. Anyway, here's Mars. Funny story about Mars. So it does have a ring as well. We'll get to that as well. So during the Earth-Luna War. Okay, I'm just gonna. No. During the Earth-Luna War, Mars got its emergency broadcast. That was not English. Mars got its emergency broadcast, right? And then it sent its thing to Earth. Here, let me make sure I'm like still recording. I am still recording. I would have cried if I wasn't. Anyway, it got its thing sent from Luna, and it sent its missiles, probably from some volcano on Olympus Mons, which I think is this one. It might be this one. I don't know. It's got like a few volcanoes on it. That's it. But it sent its missiles to Earth, completely destroyed Earth, and it was like, oh fuck. And then Luna was like, alright, we're gonna rebuild our underground cities because they kind of fucked with us, and then we're just gonna fuck off to Venus. And Mars was like, okay, cool, dude. Because, I mean, they were kind of already independent at this point. They just didn't have any imports from Earth anymore. So, after the terror of losing your home planet faded out, Mars was also like, okay, what do we do? So they just focused on terraforming their planet. They thought it would be a genius idea to merge their two asteroid moons, because Mars has two asteroid moons, Phobos and Deimos. They thought it would be genius to just kind of make them, like, merge them softly. They emphasized the softness so that it could be used as a base plate to import other materials on from, say, the asteroid belt to make their own tiny moon, which could tidally heat Mars. You know, if you friction, then it would, you know, heat it up a little bit, and that would make terraforming the planet easier because Mars is really cold. But it was quite difficult to, they underestimated how, they didn't underestimate the contact velocity. They meant for the two asteroid moons to, because they're really heavy still. So, in the sake of efficiency, because this is still early on in the system, this is like year 150 or something, they were very careful for how fast they would be coming when they touched each other, because for the sake of efficiency, they didn't want to slow them down with jet engine or like rocket fuel. They didn't want to slow them down with fuel entirely. They wanted to do what's called litho braking, which is where you slow yourself, the braking, by contacting rock. Litho braking. They just wanted the, like when you crash two cars together, they both stop, but they both get obliterated. Yeah, they didn't want the obliteration part, so they slowed them down a bit. But they thought if they just slowly poked each other, then they would get rid of all that extra velocity. Because while they wouldn't be going fast at that point, they would be really heavy. So, like, even though they're really light asteroid moons, they would be going, they would be quite heavy and quite difficult to move. So, just getting them to get near each other, like even changing their orbits was a challenge. But when they got them together, they were pretty slow, but they didn't underestimate how soft they were. Instead of just violently smashing into each other and raining debris on Mars, they didn't rain any debris on Mars, but they did subtly and slow-mo dramatically puff each other out of existence, like snowballs. Just popped each other. So, kind of, there's like a really thin ring of shiny dust around Mars. And I think that the Martians take that over, you know, a bit of extra heat. Because what good was like a small moon really going to provide? It probably would have provided something really good. But you know what? They took that over having fucking rings. So, yeah, I mean, Mars has rings now. Anyway, that's the inner system kind of done. I didn't do anything with Ceres yet. I mean, I wanted to do something with Ceres. I wanted to have Ceres be the new moon around Mars, like after they. Okay, the music is getting loud again. After the moon attempt at Mars, I just wanted, Ceres to go into an orbit around Mars, but it was hard enough moving the moon between Earth and Venus, and that was mainly because it was orbiting Earth already and it was having variable velocity. And also, Earth and Venus have both a similar orbit. They're not inclined the right way, but they're very similar orbits and they're really close to each other. While Ceres isn't as massive as the moon, it's. Hold on, I gotta itch my head. Wait. Okay. It's certainly farther from Venus, which was at the time the main source of energy, and also it was, it was quite a orbit is quite different, and it is also again quite far. So they chose not to put Ceres around Mars because that is just dumb. I want to do something with Ceres eventually, but I don't think I will do anything. Right now it's just like a marker for the asteroid belt. I don't think any humans have even visited Ceres yet. Like, it's kind of dumb. Anyway, here's Jupiter. Now, the eagle-brained among you may have noticed that this isn't supposed to be here. Also, there's supposed to be a bit more moons. I mean, you got Io, and you got Muriel, whatever that is. And then you don't have Ganymede or Callisto. You do have Calamede, though. And then you have, just behind it, a ring of stuff. Now, let me explain. So, the Galilean Moons, as they were once called, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, they were the four largest moons of Jupiter. At this point, Jupiter still has its cloud of asteroids around here, but I just didn't want to simulate those for the sake of eye candy, I guess. So, let's see. Realistically, the Great Red Spot wouldn't be alive anymore. Or alive. It wouldn't be a storm. My voice is so terrible in the morning. Excuse me for my terrible voice. But anyway, realistically, the Great Red Spot wouldn't be here anymore. It is supposed to die out in 500 years or 300 years from now. This is 1,000 years in the future, so this should be replaced by some other storm. And I knew that, and I was like, okay, well, can't have Jupiter. Can't edit the gas bands on Jupiter because for some reason this spot is still there. So I was like, alright, what if I just made another gas giant? It would have been a smart idea to just make it in a different simulation, but I just moved it way out here or something, and then I was like, okay, just gonna do that, and I did it, and I did the replace object action. You could just replace object. I replaced it with something I called Jupiter OC, which I'm not searching, but I replaced it with Jupiter OC, which was my new banded Jupiter. This is my custom Jupiter. Ignore the storm, which is stupid. I did this to get rid of the storm and still have a planet that looked kind of like Jupiter, although I don't think this should be as yellow as it is. This band in particular. But the storm's still there, and I'm still crying. But whatever, it's alright, it's alright. So, that's Jupiter. Anyway, Io, what's up, dude? So, this is Io. It's very volcanic, as you can see, and the humanity knew this, and so they decided, okay, we're kind of far from the sun, right? But we want to do stuff around Jupiter, specifically mining. So they were like, all right, why don't we just yoink the heat from this moon, because it's very volcanic. It's what we call tidally heated. It's being squeezed and stretched by Jupiter a lot. Because, it's volcanic and stuff. It's tidally locked. It's in a really elliptical orbit. It's a lot of friction, a lot of heat, a lot of volcanoes. So, okay, yeah, let's do that. So they set up a geothermal energy farm. That's what it's called. Geo for geological, ground, and thermal for heat. A geothermal energy farm, to transform that geothermal energy into something of a something antimatter. Yeah, they transformed it into antimatter and then just used that as an energy source. Anyway, Muriel, you may realize, looks a hell of a lot like a Europa. And if I was watching my video, I would have been like, "This is so cool," because this means that there was some sort of life on this planet that decided, "Hey, we're not Europa. Our world's name is Muriel. Change it." And humans were like, "Okay." So I am not watching my video. I am making my video. But if any of you guys know anything about space, congratulations. I paid tribute. So there is life on Muriel. Even in like our world, Europa. I don't know what the fuck just happened there. Even in our world, Europa has a subsurface ocean. So they were like, okay, let's just look for life on the planet. So they found life on the planet, or not the planet, the moon, and some of that life was intelligent. And they were like, our moon isn't called Europa. What the fuck are you talking about? Our moon is called Muriel. And this life was trapped under a giant few mile thick sheet of ice, but they didn't really care because they didn't know there was anything above. So they're like, okay, you're like gods or something. We don't care. We're just gonna do our own thing. And so humanity has left Muriel to do its own thing. We talk sometimes, but they're just doing their thing and we're doing our thing. Like we don't talk as much as we would in present day. Probably because we're really focused on getting our shit together after that war. So, and also Muriel has its own internal conflict, so we're just gonna let Muriel do its thing. Anyways, no longer Europa, it is now Muriel. Anyway, on to this thing, but first, Calamide. So, in case, okay, why, fuck you. In case you don't already know, there are supposed to be 2 other moons around Jupiter, and neither of them are called Calamide. They are called Ganymede and Callisto. But these 2 moons had a lot of valuable minerals in them. Minerals that were quite difficult to extract because of their high gravity, being, moons. So, for the sake of energy efficiency, since, the source of energy in the system was like a volcanic moon, which is really bad, they were like, all right, we're just going to crash these 2 moons together, which, now that I think about it, was really cost effective, costly. But, they just imported some temporary antimatter from the inner system and then just crashed Ganymede into Callisto, or Callisto into Ganymede. But Ganymede, the innermost moon, into Callisto, the outermost moon, would have made more sense because the debris they left in their wake would have made this mini ring tube torus that is now around Jupiter. And Calamide is the sort of asteroid remnant. It's used as a mining depot, like a pit stop, for mining in the asteroid rings. It takes a while. I don't know why I've said that. There's a lot of resources in here, like silicate, water, salt, iron. There's a bunch of stuff in here. A bunch of resources that humans very much like. About 2 moons worth of resources, which is quite a lot. So they send their little ships out into the rings, and then they mine a few asteroids in their local area, and that's happening all throughout. And as Calamide swings around these rings, because it's in a closer orbit to Jupiter, so it goes around faster. So it sort of shifts around as this goes slower. So it's slowly circling the rings, and when it passes by, the folks on the ring just kind of go to Calamide. And it's really nice because they could go nice and slow because Calamide has almost 0 gravity. And then when they get there, they could just kind of park on the surface because the speed of the equator is almost escape velocity for this moon. So if I had it spinning any faster than it is, realistically it couldn't exist and it would just kind of fall apart. So it's basically a 0 gravity station, which is kind of cool. But yeah, just imagine really tall towers of processing stations around the moon. Just kind of messing with I don't know. They slowly go around, they come in, and then they go back out to the rings to mine, and that just happens repeatedly. And then there's resources here are sent to Io, which is kind of like the main base of the system. And then when they're at Io, they're okay. All right. When they're at Io, they're either transferred into antimatter by, like, they deconstruct the matter into pure energy, and then they reconstruct that pure energy into antimatter, because that's what they're both made out of. And then they're just kind of like, okay, that exists now. We're gonna send that off to the wherever the fuck it needs to go, or they use it for their own, little projects in the system. They help Muriel out sometimes. They're expanding the mining base. Pretty soon they could have like a full-on big space station thing. I mean, technically that's what Calumet is, but it's interesting. They are planning something, a long-term, like a billion, like a 4 billion year in the future scale, long-term, ginormous project, which I'm not going to say yet because I need to make that simulation, but it's going to be really, really big. Anyway, so yeah, that's the Jupiter system for you. And then this is going to do it again. Okay. Anyway, Saturn. So Saturn is the last planet that has a lot done with it. Now, I thought that the rings on Saturn were like farther out, but I guess this makes sense. Anyway, so here's Saturn, and here are its moons. You got a few moons here. You got Enceladus, you got Dione, however the fuck you pronounce that. You got Rhea, and you got Titan and Iapetus. Now, Enceladus, I thought previously, was a much bigger moon than it actually is, but it is a very, very small moon. It has geysers and is the source of Saturn's, what's called the E ring. I don't say that. E, it's funny. Anyways, the source of Saturn's E ring, which is like a very hazy blue ring, faint one, around Saturn. But itself, Enceladus is really tiny, so I was just like, okay, yeah, sure, not gonna have any of that, just keep fucking around, thanks, bye. I don't know what I said. But anyway, I just kept it in the simulation because it's, Enceladus. It's like one of the most memorable moons, at least for me, in the solar system, so I was like, okay, let's just have it here. So, it has really faint... I don't think Enceladus has any satellites. I think I meant to have this be like a nature reserve in the solar system. My tongue is like dead at this point. Anyway, I'm almost done. My tongue can almost rest. I gotta talk slower. Okay, so Dione, whatever this one, it has some city lights on it. It is partially colonized. Kind of like how Luna was colonized a bit. These two moons are kind of colonized. This one has city lights that are a bit brighter. There's a bigger city here. But those two pale in comparison to Titan. Now, you can't really see the lights on Titan because it's got a really thick atmosphere, but you can kind of see them a little bit through the haze. But if I turned off the atmosphere, or like made it so that you can't see it temporarily, big lights. Titan is big colonized. There's water on Titan. There's methane, seas, rivers, lakes. It's like a paradise moon that's really, really cold. But the humans have kind of adapted to that cold. I mean, it's not that cold. It has an atmosphere, and you could realistically survive. Like, right now, if you went to Titan, you could probably survive if you had, like an Alaskan scale cold winter suit. Are they called parkas? I think they're called parkas. If you had, like, one of those really fuzzy jackets, and then a gas mask, because there's no oxygen on Titan, but there's methane and ethane instead, so you don't want to set that atmosphere on fire. But, yeah, you don't... you could do a bunch of stuff. Yeah. Tight. Anyway, that is Titan. It's basically the capital of the Saturn system. There's also Rhea and the other one. But there's also Iapetus. Now, interesting story about the Saturn system. They are kind of reminding of... They're kind of similar to Earth, in the fact that they are nervous little bitches. They are scared that Mars and Luna, and eventually Venusia, will attack their system. So they have built a defense system on Iapetus. it's a really small moon and there's no city lights, but Iapetus is like a defense moon around the Saturn system. I just, like, when I was, like, pitching ideas, I just took the normal solar system and saved, like, all the major moons and also, the planets. I saved Iapetus because it was one of Saturn's moons that had this really crazy, highly eccentric and far orbit, which is, like, really weird, but I also kept it because it's, like, one of the larger ones. And, I thought I could do something cool with it, and so I decided, okay, defense missile silo thing. Like, it's kind of like a missile silo. It's like this off in the country little rock in the middle of space, but then when war comes, it just launches missiles. So yeah, that's what Iapetus does. Anyway, Uranus. Don't call it Uranus. Fuck you. Uranus is the moon, the planet, not the moon, the planet that is permanently tilted on its side, and humanity never bothered with this planet. It's like the bane of jokes, even now. Fuck you. Why were you named Uranus? Why couldn't you have been named, like, Marble, or you could have been named Umbriel. Oh, wait, is it Umbriel? No, it's Miranda. Alright. Now, Miranda is an interesting moon because it's all fucked up. At least its surface looks like it is fucked up. So, humanity, when it starts to do its project, is going to start relocating the interesting moons of the outer planets. And Miranda is one, it is like pretty much the only moon for the ice giants that's going to be relocated. Ariel, Umbriel, and Oberon are just going to be left to do their own shit. But then we have, way out here, Neptune. And Neptune is doing something. It's got Charon. I don't know how you pronounce this one. This is also a moon that is going to be did stuff. Now, humanity, very recently, like a few years ago, they decided to, like this takes place at the year 3050 or something. This happened at the year 3010 or something. Very, very recently, only when the technology has advanced quite a bit. They removed both, I completely forgot what, Triton. They removed Triton from Neptune, and they removed Charon from Pluto, and they, for whatever reason, they just tried to switch the two out. Now, Pluto doesn't exist here. My original idea was that Pluto collided with Triton, and Charon just kind of left itself here. But realistically, that wouldn't make any sense because, I mean, this doesn't make any sense anyway. Why did I do this? Whatever, it's funny. Alright, fine, you can... Here, wait. Where's Triton? I don't think Triton exists. Anyway, yeah, this is Triton. No, this is Charon, right? They're gonna move Charon, as well. They would have moved Triton, but I guess that doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. Just imagine that's Triton, I guess. I don't know why I did that. I thought it would be funny, but it just doesn't make any sense, and I'm confused. But anyway, yeah, that's the, that is the simulation called New Millennium in Seoul. Yeah. I'm gonna do, like, one for, like, 3,000 years in the future. And then one for, like, a few billion years in the future. Just so, humanity can have time to mature a little bit, because it's still a little bitch. Like, Earth is dead now. Earth is ash. But something tells me that Venusia might try some shit in the future. I mean, probably not. Venusia's got its shit together. But I think the Saturn system might try some shit in the future. And it'll have to be told, not. And then eventually it'll just, yeah. Planets will die. colonies will die out. Moons will be destroyed, and other moons, planets, things will be completely relocated for something that will happen in the future. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, I gotta make that new sim now. So, this has been this one. Thanks for your attention. Thanks. Yeah, I'll just, be on my way. Peace out, nerds. Fuck you.